Are we ready? Okay, so we're back, and we've spent the last quite a bit of time with you guys working on each of these individual advisory teams' feedback so that you could make recommendations and be another layer of feedback to help inform our decisions down the road. So what we're going to do now, you started with your organizer. You've been in different stations and had an opportunity to ask some questions and hopefully deepen your knowledge just a little bit. So we're going to take some time for you to share out and so that everybody knows what we have done in the last time that we haven't been live streaming. So I want to start with accountability. Who's going to share there? Okay, so you can go right ahead.
Okay. We talked quite a bit about accountability, and our expert is Dr. Aroa. So I'm going to try to summarize what she said, and then you realize that that's probably going to be very difficult, but I'll do my best. One of the things that we talked about was the minimum end, where should it be set at, and one of the opportunities that's going to come about, I think, in the next few weeks is they're going to be able to take the 2016 data and do some modeling with achievement, growth, graduation rate, and ELL growth in progress, and look at some variations in weighting and how would that be affected with different levels of the minimum N, and do some modeling with that so we can make a better informed decision. And so I was very pleased to hear that, because just kind of looking at it in the cold, where do you go? And so if she can they can take that 2016 data and do some modeling with some different instances, then I think we'll be able to make a better informed decision there. And another thing that we talked about as far as with the fifth indicator, we all realize that there's going to be another indicator that goes with that, is that right now with our data collection, we may not be able to do everything that we would like to do. And so this ESSA plan is going to be an ongoing changing plan as time goes on. So we might have a list of things that we can do right now with the data that we have, and then as our data collection changes over time, then we can do other things as a fifth indicator, or have that just to be continually improving. And that was one thing that I really liked how she said it. This is a continuous improvement plan for us as a state, but it's also going to be a continually improving plan. It's going to be a plan that will improve it as time goes on. And another thing that we discussed is that, when you do this modeling and we look at some of the different weights, then in the future we may have to amend those weights as the data comes in and we see that, the impact is not what we thought it would be, or the impact was not good, and so we may have to look at some amendments in the future along that time. One of the questions that came up in some of the other groups as they went by was for a desire, could we have for the report card, not just an overall rating, but an individual rating for the different components. And that's one of the things that she showed us, that definitely that could happen. We could look at some individual ratings for growth, individual ratings for achievement, individual ratings for graduation rate, and some of the other things that we look at. And I think that would be a great opportunities for schools to look at where am I and where can I improve, or where can we improve. Another question that came up was, could the ELP be weighted differently for small, medium, and large schools? For instance, if a school had a small population of EL students and they didn't score well, then that whole school wouldn't be penalized because of a small group of students. That the number of students could that be taken into account in the weighting? And we also discussed, well, if we could do it for ELL, could it also be done for some of the other subgroups also? So that was something that we thought of as an opportunity that maybe that could be looked at in the future. Talk just a little bit about the reporting, how important it was for schools and districts to get usable information in the reporting. And so that's one of the great goals, I think, that for accountability that we all have. And I guess she'll correct me if I left anything out or said something wrong. Does anyone have a question?
Thank you. If nobody has a question, we'll move on for the comprehensive school support and improvement.
Just as a summary for our group, we really focused on this shift that's happening with focus on capacity at the district level. So districts being able to utilize Title I resources and supplemental resources going to districts instead of schools directly, and just kind of giving districts that allocation to approve their targeted improvement plan and just build that capacity from the district level towards the school levels. So some questions that came up were misalignment with assessments for schools and school improvement, would districts account with multiple schools performing at different levels, and keeping that consistent assessment towards all schools who are at different levels within the district. Some opportunities that were kind of mentioned was balancing state interventions and supports with district level interventions. Opportunity for imagining schools who are struggling, schools maybe perhaps in academic distress, and how to help support those schools to get off the academic distress levels. I think that pretty much, Dr. Jeffcoat, do you have anything to add to it?
I think one question that was asked, and I think it was asked by the stakeholders as well, was just what's the exit criteria and timeline, and those are things that haven't been decided yet. But it would be assumed that there will be goals that are set for a school, and schools will be empowered and supported at the administrative level as well as individual classrooms to improve. And once there is some of the goals have been met, then of course the exit will take place. But those details will be ironed out later. But we're certainly aware that that's a question that's been asked by many.
Thank you, guys. Let's move on to educator equity and effectiveness.
So my group mostly, we had a few questions, but we kind of summarized it by saying we can move from a system that's primitive and drawn by compliance to a system that offers support and a growth. I can't read my mindset. I can't read my handwriting anymore. Using multiple measures in a system that educators can advocate for themselves. So basically, instead of just saying you're effective or you're not effective, we can kind of change the site of it and say, okay, well, this is how we can grow our teachers to make them better, instead of just saying you're not good. Through this, we'll have the opportunity to rebrand perception and a change of mindset. It opens the opportunity to focus on educator growth and encourages collaboration across districts and amongst educators, and promotes teacher leadership, which is really important. Did I miss anything?
Okay, if there's no questions there, we'll move on to assessment.
Okay, on assessments, we had, out of our key ideas, one of the main things that came up was that in looking at our assessment system, we're basically talking about high school. And so in our high school testing, we would still be able to use the ACT, which is something that we're already using, so that it would already be something that we're already working towards and working with, so that we wouldn't have to change a whole lot on the direction that we're moving. As far as our opportunities, there were several different things that were brought up, because in assessments you can test at 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade, depending on how we choose to do so. So one of the questions on that was, if we test at 9th grade, what happens to high schools that are only 10th through 12th grade? How do they become accountable? What are their accountability measures? So then we looked at the difference between testing in 10th and 11th grade. So there was a possibility of a student that had brought up information that on 9th grade you could do the ACT Aspire, in 10th grade you could do the pre-ACT, and then 11th grade you could actually take the ACT, so that it would actually give you a baseline for growth for students. So that not only would you be taking these tests, but then you could actually see growth, and then it could also equalize some of the issues with students that get to take the ACT multiple times that are of higher socioeconomic class, and students that only take it the one time. So having the opportunity to take it in 9th grade, 10th grade, and then being able to take the actual ACT in 11th grade, the pre-ACT would give them a chance to see that test before they took the one in 11th grade. On the side note to that was the CTE, or the Career Tech education, and being able to assess a separate time where it would be 2 different tracks. So you could assess with the ACT for those that plan to go to a college track, or those that could do a CTE certification assessment that has all of the rigor that you would need for your regular assessment in ACT would be available in the CTE testing, so that you would have both sides of the testing track. And then students could choose, depending on what they want to do, or is that they could take the ACT or they could take the Career Tech and still have the same type of rigor in their assessments, so that they would be assessed for the same types of skills. One of the other questions was about a peer review, and one of the things that came up was it depends on how accountability is set up as to whether or not our assessments would need peer reviews. So that until that piece is taken care of and decided on, that still leaves that out as to whether or not we'll have peer reviews that will be necessary for the ACT. I think that kind of wraps up most of what we had that was listed. Oh, there was one more about getting data from our past testing dips from when we changed tests to see how this would affect those scores for those students. And I believe Hope said that she was going to be able to get that data and be able to look at it so that she could bring that back to us and show us what could be possible if we changed.
Thank you. Let's move on and go to English learners.
Okay. The major topics here were that there would be an opportunity to have electronic coordination of the home language survey, the entry criteria, as well as the exit criteria to facilitate communication for transfer students. Minimum N of 5 here for English language learners, and that it would only apply to the English language proficiency indicator and not the assessment. That would have a different one. And if a minimum N of 5 were to be used, then it would affect 95% of our schools, where a current N only affects captures about 70% of our schools. On the recently arrived, it would apply to first-year students in the U.S. On math and English language arts. But one of the questions we had for that was that is that 1 year cumulative, like so if a student came in, then went back, came back, so how would that actually work? And then the English language proficiency indicator would be new for most of our districts because in the past has only applied to Title I schools. Former ELs would be included up to 4 years in the accountability subgroup. Opportunities here, you would have an opportunity to change from the focus on individual child, or the test, whether they pass the test, to actually the growth of that individual child. It would be consistent across districts and schools in identification and the accountability support. It would be an opportunity to undo the rigid exit criteria that we've been using in the past. Also an opportunity for common home language surveys, because I think currently districts can have whatever home language survey they have, might be 3 or 4 questions or as much as 10. Another question is, will the screening process be accurate? Because when you have students sometimes transitioning from out of the country, they're timid or shy at the very beginning, but then you realize that, oh, they are pretty fluent English speakers. So that's something to consider. And then the last question was, should the exit criteria of ELS be tied to content tests that many of our English-speaking students are not being proficient in? So we're expecting maybe a higher growth for those students than our speaking population is achieving. And then also, will there be support for ELs once they transition into a regular classroom, or does money and support just stop at that point?
Thank you guys for your summary. And before we move on, I want to ask if there are any of the advisory teams, leaders who want to add any clarifying points or share one last thing before we move on. Okay, y'all are good. Can we go to the slide, Kimberly? Oh, thank you. So the last thing that I want to do is, we talked about when this started that we wanted to deepen your understanding, and we were hoping that you could do just exactly what you did, summarize key ideas and opportunities. And I would like to know from you whether it's just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You're not on camera, so nobody's going to see it, and I won't call you out. But for our own feedback, to know if this was a good process for you, give me a thumbs up. If it didn't work for you and your understanding is no better than it was, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Give me the truth so we can do better the next time. So, okay, that's good for me to hear. And I also want to ask if any of you have any suggestions, or if you had a question that did not get answered during this time period.
I just want to know what happens next. So we've met, we've talked. I know that we've had all the stakeholder groups, a lot of conversations that were had, a lot of questions that were asked today. So of the committees, what happens? Do they then go out and meet again and follow up and then come back?
So we're going to take all of the information that you guys developed today while you were here. We're going to get that summarized and analyzed, and so that's another level, and the advisory teams will go from there and start writing based on the feedback that we have received. And our hope is that next month at this meeting, we will have some draft sections for you to review and give us feedback on some actual writing of the plan. That's a lot to do in 4 weeks, but that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're planning for. Does that answer?
Dr. Aroa had talked about having some model data. Will that model data be available by April, or do you think it's going to take longer than that?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
I think parts of it we can have ready in April. There are certain things that have to be ready for. I think parts of it we can have ready because they have to be ready for the TAC committee, because they're just, the TAC is always so helpful in ferreting out details that get lost when you're having so many different conversations, and they bring unique perspectives to it. But I think that I don't know that all of it can be done within 4 weeks, but I think that we're going to try to prioritize what's absolutely needed to inform the next step. I do envision that there will be chunks of some of the accountability section that just can't be completely fleshed out until we finish the process of modeling for impact, looking at the impact, and moving it more up the stream for decisions. So,
Okay.
By May, though, we need to have something, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if our answer makes me feel better or a little more nervous, but I have confidence in you that
Yes.
we're going to have it. It is reality, that is true. So, and the reality is that you may have some sections to look at next month, and some sections you either may not, or you will have very incomplete because we don't have the data, which wouldn't be beneficial for you to take your time to do that anyway if we didn't have the data. So, any other questions? Any final thoughts? You guys have worked really hard, and I want to thank you so much because you came in here this morning, and I know that you all had to drive to get here, so you started out your morning, and in the last 4 hours, you have been working hard. And I want to commend you on that, and I also want to thank all of our advisory team leaders because you guys have worked hard for the last 4 hours, and I want that to be recognized as well. Thank you so much. This couldn't have happened without your help. And if no one has any final, I'm sorry, thank you. I knew I would forget. I told her to remind me. And this will be the last thing before we're...
Hello, one last thing. We are going to host our second Twitter town hall tonight at 8 p.m. The topics of discussion will be factors that lead to student success based on different age ranges, whether it's kindergarten to third grade, 5th to 8th grade, and so forth. What quality PD looks like, class size, and teacher leadership. So we look forward to you joining us tonight at 8 o'clock. Follow the hashtag ESSA in Arkansas. Thank you.
All right. Again, I want to thank each one of you as committee members for your hard work today, and then the advisory teams, because I know what we saw today was not just results of what happened today. You team members have put in lots of long hours, and I want you to know it's not unnoticed, and we appreciate what you do, not just on this, but for kids. You know, what we're doing today and what you've been spending hours and hours doing is going to make a difference for kids, and I appreciate that very, very much. And I'm not going to say more because I'll get emotional, but I appreciate what you do, and we are very blessed as a state to have such hardworking experts, so thank you. With that, unless anybody has anything you want to add, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I move.
All right.
Second.
All right. So we are adjourned. Thank you. Safe travels.